More Gravity. Oh no, sorry. Hello everybody. Hello Gravitrons. I'm More Gravity. Let's play chess. So I'm in a pretty bad mood right now. I feel horrible. I should say. What I'm saying is, I feel horrible right now. Let's see if a few games of chess can help me out. Okay. Alright, so we have 2 games to review. I'll try a rematch. If he doesn't accept a rematch, then we'll go to game history and review these 2 games. Let's review this most recent game first. Pardon me. Review this game. We're actually going to finish the game against computer. Maybe we have to review to do that. Let's see, Jord. Okay, so here there's a number of options. I see that it's a mate in 2. I might have taken the bishop instead. But as a mate, as far as a mate in 2 goes, I think queen takes b4 and queen takes a2 both do the trick here. I think queen takes a2 is a little faster. My opponent throws his bishop away, and we'll recapture with the rook. There's no reason not to. And then queen to a1 or b2 is mate. So make it queen to b2 is checkmate. Let's go over what we have there. We can even close this and then get the next game ready. While we're analyzing that first game, 2 quick games, quick resonations. I was smashing right through the opening moves, so glad to have those wins for sure. Yeah. Okay, so we see that black played an accurate game and white did not. It was a quick game, more or less, so maybe going over it won't take too much time. Standard stuff, you know, supporting central pawns as a whole for each side on d5. For both sides, that whole is contested. This isn't all too strange or weird. I make this sacrifice on g3, or on g4 rather. Why would I do that? Giving away material. For starters, the pin is strong. It's against a very strong piece, the queen. In addition, the knight that might normally come to back up that knight so that the queen can, you know, in some manner escape the pin. That knight is already committed deep within the battlefield, even as far as black side of the chessboard. The bishop that would be on e2 to break the pin and defend the knight is doing duty on the c4 square and is protected by the d3 pawn while doing so, blocking the bishop's ability to come back and help. Not only that, normal harassing or just attacking the bishop that I have on g4 doesn't work. For one, that the h4 square is covered strongly by both bishop and queen. and for 2, that rook to g1 doesn't do the trick either. It's almost there, but then h5, as I believe we see in the game, protects the bishop. And this pin on the f3 knight is a long-term pin. So knight takes g4 as a blunder. I'm not quite sure it goes quite that serious from a computer standpoint, and from a practical, pragmatic, and human standpoint. I think the knight is doing well to eliminate those 2 pawns and allow for this pin, which changes the nature of the game. We'll see the evaluation change in our favor as we move forward. For instance, rook to g1 here by my opponent, and we already see, as opposed to here, the computer is considering black slightly better after this rook to g1 move. h5, and maybe slightly better even so. Bishop to b5 pins my knight. It's not as serious a pin. First we can start by levying a check, and when that check is blocked, and blocked by the non-optimal piece. But, or is it? Could perhaps white play bishop to d2? Yes, the answer is yes. Bishop d2 was the best move, because upon queen takes b5, then knight takes, then knight to c7 check, and white will pick up the queen on b5. So the best move here was bishop to d2, perhaps almost the best move, just barely behind queen to d2. My opponent played neither, saw the possibility of queen takes b5 as a threat rather than an opportunity, backpedaled with his knight, and now black is almost even in the computer's eyes, and my say-so is that this pin puts black ahead. Castle's king side, or castle's queen side, there's no reason not to. Captures on c6, captures on c6. Well, yeah, after that it's kind of just a game. Maybe b5, b4 is in order for black. Computer has bishop takes c6, b takes c6, queen e2, and then f6. It's not all that clear for any reason other than material where white is ahead. So maybe I have to go back to find the error move here. It seems like the computer is pointing to still knight g4, though I'm kind of dug in to saying that that's the right move. Maybe it's not. Maybe bishop b5 shows that's not the right move, even after the miscue of knight c3. At any rate, castle's kingside is now fine. Bishop takes c6, b takes c6, and maybe something like king d7, swing the rook over. The diagonal is protected very well. Not only that, but the king can bounce into relative shelter on e8, throw a pawn in the way, or just step back to something on the c file. So black's king is safe enough, and maybe white is proving something here. We see black now pounce immediately on an error, and this is a type of error that occurs with a long-term weakness, like the one on white's pin, like the pin on f3. These types of errors, like queen to d2, it doesn't look like an error, right? You didn't miscalculate or sacrifice a piece, but still, knight to d4 seizes everything. Why don't computers see this kind of pin as much of a serious matter that it is? It's similar with Karpov once played a brilliant move. Bishop to b8. With his pawn already at b7, Karpov played bishop to b8. Black's rook was all ready to pounce on a7. Karpov played the move bishop to b8 with this type of imprisonment against the rook on a8. The rook captures on b8 and gives up the exchange right away. Not only that, but white captures and promotes to queen immediately. So that's not good for black. Capturing the pawn on a7 and the bishop captures on a7. And white has collected a rook in exchange for a pawn. These types of moves, these types of imprisoning moves are still difficult for many computers to accurately assess. To accurately assess. What's another move like that? Since we're on black's queen side, if white has captured a knight on a8, sorry, if white has with his knight captured a rook on a8, and the rook, the knight, it's now black's turn. He can't immediately capture that knight. There's the idea of a rescue. A lot of the game will center on, do we rescue that a8 knight? Do we let him be captured at the cost of black investing a lot of time, initiative, moves, tempo in trying to capture the knight on a8? A lot of times that knight's fate is not certain for many moves. And this is all reflected in the fact that computers don't know either. They don't know. They don't know how to evaluate that much of the time. Other things, pawn storms, right? We're talking about a little bit of the difference between risk and uncertainty. Black launches a pawn storm here. Computers don't know what to... I mean, to be honest, humans don't really know what to say about it. We're not sure how that's going to shake out, right? But computers, too, don't know what to say about pawn storms because they're too nebulous, too vague, and too distant to calculate concretely. So we'll clear this. Bishop to b8 is an example. Pawn storms are an example. And pins are an example. King safety actually computers are pretty good with king safety, I would guess, but that's another one. King safety might be something too. I haven't found that to be a problem with humans versus computers. King safety, that gets honorable mention for a difficult understanding. Okay. So the knight captures. So I played knight to d4. I would also add that I'm not accusing my opponent of having used computers during play. I don't probably I don't think that's what happened. I don't know for sure, but I'm just saying, like, if that kind of hypothetical, if this were against a computer, these are some of the ideas. But my opponent, humans can fall to the same issues, is what I'm saying. My opponent played bishop takes d3, and it looks for a moment maybe white has salvaged the situation, except after either e or c takes d4. I said d3, I meant d4. Bishop takes d4, either e or c takes d4, and the pawn will be, at very least, the pawn will be able to capture the knight on c3. So there will definitely be some amount of material gained for black. Exactly how much? It's probably going to be more than just the pawn against the knight here. Let's see. My opponent chose the castle. Computer wants best move of bishop to c4. Things aren't exactly or even rook to b1. You capture here, and then the impulse for white would be to capture back, and then it's a capture here with check, and you're picking up this rook most often. So the computer best responses alleviate that concern by either moving the rook to the b file, where that will soon be vacated. It will soon be half open, and be a great place for that rook to attack against black's position. Black still has the huge advantage of being up a piece. So castle's queenside is not necessarily all that much better or worse than these other responses. We're still gathering a piece, and b4 doesn't do it. We see this mate in 2 occur, right? That was against the computer. My opponent resigned before then, just as a matter of housekeeping, a matter of fact. After black's 15th move, my opponent resigned. So right here, it's a respectful way. It's respectful without playing too deep into the game. So that I felt that was fine. And this is against practice against computer. Black, under time pressure, you might capture the bishop and try to just forge through after that. But do some quick calculation is probably even better. Queen takes a2, and either on b2 or either on b2 or a1, the queen will deliver checkmate. Right, this throwing away the bishop, like they might say, why did he do that? Why did he do that? Remember, now as in these moves, we're playing against the computer. The computer sees this as, oh, it takes black one more move to checkmate, and says that's a little bit more difficult. People don't do as well when there's one more move to checkmate, and that's true in general. Mate in 2 is usually easier to solve than a mate in 3. Mate in 3 is usually easier to solve than a mate in 4. So that's why you see this throwaway material check on d7. Meet that check with anything sane. Like here, rook takes d7 is fine, and the mate will still be there. It didn't go away. I mean, sometimes, sometimes it'll roll into another check or something, but a computer does that. That's the computer saying you have a mate in 3 to solve rather than a mate in 2, or whatever it was. If we got mate in 2 to solve rather than a mate in 1. Checkmate on b2. The game is over. All right. You see that black's play was accurate. Okay. Meanwhile, all right. We're gonna finish this game against computer. White to move. There's a number of moves that are appealing. We can grab the d file while contesting. We can play rook to b1. D file with really either rook makes enough sense to me. E file, no. E file we don't really want. It's pretty darn strongly blocked. C file, so you don't need to protect this c pawn. It's not being attacked, and it looks like bishop e2 can always come to the defense, or one rook to another to c1, and it's only one lonely pawn on its own anyway. So even beyond that, if it's snapped off the board immediately, then the black c file pawn becomes quite weak. So we're not too worried about protecting the c4 pawn. Protecting the a2 pawn is more important. So that's a consideration. So like for instance, in order to attack, in order to claim the b file, to have good control of the b file with opportunities for attacks on black's queenside pawns, in order to do that, we have to leave the protection of the a2 pawn, and it's honestly not that big a deal. How's black can't, well, rook d2 can put it in jeopardy, but then rook to b8, and we're either picking up the h8 rook, or black's rook needs to double back to d8, captures, and with a material lead, with material lead, this is better for white. This is something I would note. I'm not sure if this is even known, so this is like golden. In rook and pawn endgames, if one side in a rook and pawn endgame has a material advantage, It's usually best if there are one rook per side rather than two rooks per side for the side with the material advantage. This is my understanding. Not only that you're dwindling down how much overall material there is, but you're eliminating opportunities for strong batteries of one sort or another. And I don't know why, for some reason, one rook with a material advantage is better than two rooks against two rooks with a material advantage. Okay, all this being said, it's hard to. I think I'm going to play rook to b1 here because of the multitude of targets, because of the tactics along the back rank that might be really helpful. The other move that I would consider, since now this rook would be going to b1, would also maybe challenge on the d file most directly. I mean, what's going to happen to the d8 rook? Guard a pawn that's. I mean, you can guard it, but it's just a pawn. And same thing on c8 or a8. That rook is just guarding one pawn at a time. So he's probably going to move to b8 or exchange. Let's take b8 first, and then white can move b1, and it's almost certain to have. We're almost certain to have a rook exchange. And that's sounding good as well. Rook to b1. Let's think of some of the more outside the box solutions, perhaps for black. Rook to b1. What about king to e7 right away? Now, black's back rank rooks are connected. b8 can be met. We might be able to play then rook to b7. And one type of protect or another along the nearby rook. I think maybe would protect along the c8 to keep the back rank so secure. And if necessary, the king can move to d7, and white has rook d1. Let's clear and say we're considering rook to b1. Then black king to e7. Rook to b7. Rook to c8. King e7 has to be considered in terms of responses because of how strongly it helps hold on to these three pawns that are already partially secure. It gets out of the way of these rooks being connected. It can't be attacked by a light squared bishop. Black can now coordinate rook h8 to d8. So king e7 serious. Alright. Well, that's interesting, but I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to play rook at f to d8. I'm just looking for maybe a trade. We also note now that the bishop holds d1 as well as the d1 rook's fellow rook on a1. So we're not gonna go too crazy about that. Let's just get this trade in, man. Yeah. Trading pieces in the endgame. We said we might talk about other lingering computer difficulties. King e7 is a difficult move to find. That's a strong move. And after captures, and rook d1, the computer will say rook takes d1 is fine for black there. It's not. Frankly, it's not a good move. You would play rook b8 or you would play rook g8. If it were an important game where you were pressing for a win, a human player would play rook g8 or rook to b8. So rook takes d1 check and bishop takes d1, and I'm gonna close this out. That's what did my opponent play? f5. Okay, so we'll stop movement first. Yeah, it reminds me of First Night, starring Richard Gere, Julia Armand, Richard Gere, and Sean Connery. The first scene, so no spoilers. I guess I can let this be known. Um, Richard Gere is showing off, or it's clear that he and his character are very awesome swordsmen of the long sword type, and he's battling in a sword fight against a townsperson that is for fun, fictitious and all that. They don't. It doesn't. It gets a little bit testy at times, but they're not out to kill each other. Yeah, at one point, he says the way to win a sword fight is to be the last person holding a sword. And he's able to, he has technique, and the other person's sword goes flying, and he catches it, and he has, it's all great. It doesn't hurt anybody because that was the show, right? So if in sword fighting, the way to win a sword fight is to be the last person holding a sword, or he might say with, the last person with a sword, then very often in chess, the way to win a chess game is to be the last person left with a piece. In this case, White's light squared bishop is that only piece left. You can you aim for that and then figure out the rest once you get there. You link these different parts of your knowledge. Like, I know to put most of my pawns on dark squares, and only stay away from that when certain circumstances, like if black has to play a4, then I grab this pawn, and that's a good thing. With a light squared bishop, that's the way to do it. But you link that endgame knowledge with some calculation and pattern recognition, maybe some attacking or whatever during the middle game, and you'll end up winning chess games. There's another saying that goes, you have to win 3 games when playing chess. You have to win the opening, you have to win the middle game, and you have to win the end game. That usually bodes true too. Some games don't actually have an end game. They resolve themselves in the middle game, and rarely a game will kind of come to destruction in the opening phase. But more than half of the games last through all the way to an end game. So with that in mind, we're going to just be the last person with a sword. It's my turn to move. I'm debating whether or not to capture on f5. In blitz, I probably capture and not think too much about it. I have to be careful not to let black's kingside pawn majority overwhelm white. That's not going to happen. Plus, on g4 takes f5, black must capture back with the e pawn, and then he has some really seriously damaged pawn structure. So I say g takes f5. Some of these moves are experience and nothing more. I'm gonna capture the f pawn first, or freeze black's pawn on a4, because now it's very direct to capture that pawn. I said pattern recognition. You see an expert or experienced, an expert. Well, expert strictly defined. You see a master, an international master, or a grandmaster make certain moves. It's just how did he, she, or they know that right away? A lot of it's pattern recognition. You find things over time. There's wonderful research done by Dr. Paul DeGroot. Yeah, I think he was most active in these inquiries in the 60s and 70s, and he found that amateur chess players didn't chunk as much as masters. What do we mean by chunking? So let's take the position chunking. So an amateur chess player doesn't have as much experience, right? As part of the deal. Here with white to move, an amateur chess player says there's a knight here, and there's a bishop here, and probably amateurs, and I should say intermediate, really. Intermediate chess players and amateurs can see, okay, if he captures my knight, I capture him back. But they might not right away have the knowledge that these doubled pawns are not good in the long run. That's sort of what we're getting at, but I started at the end. We'll go back to the beginning. What it really is an amateur chess player sees. This is a good example. Okay, an amateur chess player will take this portion of the board alone. An intermediate or an amateur chess player, less experienced, however you term it, sees this part of the board as 1, king on g1, 2, knight on f1, 3, pawn on h2, 4, pawn on g2, 5, pawn on f2, 6, knight on f3. That's 6 different things to remember when you're looking at just that one part of the board. For those of you in psychology, 7 plus or minus 2, all that kind of stuff is in effect here, right? 6 different pieces to keep track of. An experienced chess player says, white castled kingside this game without a fiend shadow. First of all, it's words, sometimes easy to remember. But second of all, it's chunking. This constellation, I've seen this thousands of times. I know what a knight looks like on f3 in front of a pawn wall that's protecting a king and rook that I've just castled. I already know that. There's one thing, boom, like that, chunking. The other classic example of chunking is area code, exchange, final 4 digits. Somehow makes telephone numbers a little bit easier to remember. What was I on about? That's about chunking, chess masters chunking, experienced chess masters chunking, and intermediate chess players not quite doing as well. And how did DeGroot find this? Experiments, and I don't go too far into things, but he found that the chess masters were only superior at remembering chess positions. The task was remember this chess position, right? The chess masters were only superior at recalling and remembering chess positions when those chess positions were taken from an actual game. If these pieces are spread out more randomly on the board, then the chess masters don't hold much of I think it was no advantage in that case. If the pieces are similar in every way except not taken from a game, it's still a legal position. It's still allowed by chess rules, but it doesn't make much. It either doesn't make much sense in terms of it being a game, and that's because it wasn't taken from a game. It was randomly made. Then all of a sudden, the intermediate chess players, the experienced but not extreme, the somewhat experienced chess players are recalling things about the same, even as high as the masters. The masters lose their their one upsmanship or their gift when the pieces are randomly arranged. I think subsequent investigations, I'll have to check myself on this, but it also showed that chunking was a big part of the reason. Grouping items into a cohesive unit and lightening the memory load. Isn't that cool? That's kind of cool. I feel like that's cool. All right, so that came up out of the gameplay, but to some extent, I may have lost my place along the way, and I want to view this the game with the practice at the end to see how accurate it was. Kind of moving on to the next thing here. My opponent resigned here. It's neither it's not a late resignation. It's a respectful but not too early resignation. So I was glad to have won this chess game. I've done some research of my own with how chess players analyze chess games, and I plan to. I want to reach out to. I was thinking this the other day, so I'll say this online. I want to reach out to my advisors and to Chess Life magazine, maybe to the United States Chess Federation as well, and say like, hey, I've got this cool research I did. How can we let mostly my fellow chess players, but other academics or people interested, how can I get this out there? My work focuses a lot on the order of presentation of sequences of chess play and how that influences judgments of how quality those moves were, those players, how strong did they play. I don't want to get all too in depth in that, but I might be reaching out to Chess Life magazine and my advisors soon enough. I think it was okay to say that. Alright, so the computer's gonna I'll close this. I can close this, I know where it is, and we might play another game. I don't think so. I might take a break here. Alright. So yeah, with the extended portion of the game, the accuracy proves strong. It remains. We started at the resigned part of the game, didn't we? This could. Alright, so this is white has an extra piece. I want to note here though. These moves in the early going. White makes a number of small mistakes. Get to this position. Yeah. Bishop takes c3. It's not a good move. I didn't do concrete calculation here. I saw that after bishop takes c3, my king is now, for a move or two or three, is castled. It's there. So instead of capturing back, we move to make incursions against black's queen side. But why? The bishop's gonna get this pawn quicker and stuff. Aha. But my pawn gets there with the threat of capturing a piece while also queening. makes things better for white. That's how white gets with it. You see these capture races from time to time. Sometimes on the F and G file. um, Sometimes here on the B and C file. The point is the pawn. If there's a pawn against a bishop in these types of capture races, very often the pawn's gonna win by way of it's not being as important to be captured, but can still threaten something as serious as pawn takes A8 equals queen against bishop takes A1, and then the queen looms large against black's bishop on A1. So just to note that pawns are a bit faster in these types of capture races. Tactics that depend greatly on initiative, tempo, timing, as in a race. Okay, that's all I wanted to show. The reason I said I'll go ahead with the pawn is because capturing while queening that's undeniable. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Have a great night. Oh, I don't know if I revealed this. I graduated from Lehigh University. Very proud about that. So, as that's all I had to say about that. It's amazing. All right, thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.